Welcome back to Collab Farm, the podcast where we learn how to better farm together. And this week's guest is a shining example of just that. Andrew, also known as Walkie Talkie Call Sign Gopher, is one of the farmer owners of Full Circle Community Farm in Wisconsin, the land of co-ops in the U.S., evidently. He came back to his generations-old family farm in 2017 after college, along with his now wife Heather, to not only continue the family farming tradition, but diversify both its production and its membership. He talks about his returning to the farm, their simplified and flexible business structure, using what he learned about ecology to develop the farm's ownership and membership model, and that you don't have to have it all figured out to begin to include other members of the farm in the decision-making process. His wife Heather also is the manager of the Slow Farmers Co-op, a farmer marketing cooperative of 8 small farms providing free choice direct-to-consumer CSA. We get into how that evolved over time, how it took off during COVID, and how Keystone farms, such as themselves, can leverage their production capacity to not only sell more produce, but make more space for beginning and specialty farmers as well. They, and by that I mean now the 5 farmer owners of Full Circle Community Farm, were awarded the Marble Seed Farmer of the Year Award in 24. Now, if you're interested in hearing more about what they're doing, about what Andrew has to say or Heather has to say, they will be presenting at Marble Seed's 2025 conference happening February 20th through the 22nd. So before we get to that conversation, let's take a quick word from a couple of our show sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Grow Organic. In our no-till community, we understand that quality growing supplies and selection make all the difference. As the nation's largest independent retailer dedicated to regenerative and sustainable agriculture, Peace Valley Farm and Garden Supply is your one-stop shop offering 5,000 reliable products, including cover crops, soil amendments, tools, and more. Serving market farmers since 1976, it's before I was born, they understand the needs of growers, both big and small. Save 20% on your first order now with code NOTIL24. That's NOTIL 24. Apply for a commercial account for year-round savings and dedicated support. Visit groworganic.com/notill or use the link down in the description to get started today. This episode is also brought to you by ASAP, the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project. The Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, ASAP, will offer the Business of Farming Conference on Saturday, February 22nd in the beautiful Asheville, North Carolina. This annual conference brings together professional and aspiring farmers from across the Southeast to network and share resources to build viable farm businesses. Scholarship for BIPOC and limited resource farmers are available, as well as discounts for farm partners registering together. Absolutely love to see that. Registration opens in mid-November. Find out more at asapconnections.org. That's asapconnections.org. All right, back to the show. Andrew from Wisconsin, Full Circle Community Farm. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty great, Jackson. Thanks for having me.
So I found you all through a guest recommendation through the Marble Seed Conference from last year. And you all were named, I believe, Farmer of the Year by Marble Seed in 2024. So congratulations. And I started poking around your website and looking into things, and you all have a very interesting farm and a very interesting history that I'd like to get into. But first, if you could just give us sort of the general standard introduction to your farm, like where are you located, how many acres you're growing on, and what are you growing and raising there?
Yeah, this will be great practice. I've been working on my elevator pitch. We're a multi-generational regenerative organic farm in Northeast Wisconsin. We primarily focus on market vegetables, pastured heritage pigs, and grass-fed organic beef, as well as a bunch of other things. But that's primarily what we do. We do farmers markets, farm to school, wholesale, and CSA, as well as selling into and helping with some local food hub cooperative organizations that are trying to establish the local food system here in Northeast Wisconsin.
Yeah. And how many acres are you doing all that on?
We kind of split it up into the 3 main enterprises of the cattle, the pigs, and the vegetables. Vegetables, we have 15 acres, about 12 of that under cultivation. the hogs we have on anywhere between 5 to 10 acres, depending on when you ask me. And cattle we graze on about 300 acres.
There's a good video on your website. I'll put a link to it in the show notes of you all kind of talking about the history of the farm. Is that something you'd be willing to share and talk about, like where the farm sort of started? I believe it's over 100 years it's been in the family, and how that's transitioned from what it was into what it is now.
Yeah, definitely. I grew up here. Actually living in the house that I grew up in. When I was born, my parents were starting to, well, they had taken over for a few years. My grandpa and uncle, great uncle, I guess, had been in a partnership doing a dairy at that point. And my parents continued the dairy tradition, started selling into Organic Valley, I believe in 2002. But even before that, they were doing management intensive rotational grazing, kind of based on the Allen Savory model. And before that, it was, your traditional Polish homestead farm where my great great grandpa, I think as well, had built a tiny little cabin and grew everything for subsistence. And it just kind of stayed established in the community. My grandpa was the president of the local Cooperative cheese factory that was right down the road. So we have a rich history of dairy and cattle and hogs as well. Cooperatives run pretty deep here in Northeast Wisconsin. It's gotten a little way away from that in recent years, but there's a long tradition history of that in this space.
So you grew up there, and it's been established, in the family for this long. What was that process? I believe you went away and went to college. What was that like, sort of leaving the farm and then coming back to the farm?
So I went to college and said, I'm never coming back. I don't want to farm anymore. I grew up as a dairy kid, milking cows, shoveling poop, feeding calves, driving tractor. I was not enamored by it, didn't see myself doing it. So I went to school started with biochemistry and then switched over to microbiology, and then loved school so much that I decided to stay and do a master's degree. That's where I met my now wife, Heather. She was also doing a master's program in the biology department there at Northern Michigan University in Marquette on the shores of Lake Superior. And so I went away. At that point, my parents decided to stop the dairy. They had a apprentice through the dairy grazing apprenticeship program that was based out of UW Extension Cooperative Services there, co-ops again. So he ended up buying the cattle herd, moving it to his farm. And at that point, my parents switched over to the beef. Then Heather and I kind of decided how many other people get a chance to farm, have a family land and get access to that. So we thought we'd give it a try. Move back here. Scott, our other partner, was a graduate of my mom's program. She teaches sustainable ag at the local tech college, community college for some folks. So she has an associate's degree program going there. Scott was one of the first graduates and was doing a small market garden. When we moved back, the three of us decided to pool our vegetables together and take them to farmers market. And I guess the rest is history. And then
2024 Farmers of the Year, right?
Yeah, I couldn't have been there without my parents and everyone else that's been on the farm, keeping it going for generations before. And I think it was kind of a real shout out to the convergence of multiple generations of that land ethic come together.
So yeah, you all moved back. It seems like from the research that I did, you all began to diversify into vegetable production and hogs. And then, you mentioned your other partner in the farm. So what was the idea for bringing in another farm partner? And why did you all go that route instead of just taking on the entire farm yourself?
Well, as I'm sure you know, and probably most of the other listeners here know, that taking on an entire farming operation by yourself is a tall task. So that's where I see, and we all see, the biggest benefit of having it as a cooperative entity is that responsibility and decision making kind of gets spread out so that you don't have all that pressure of every single decision being on one or two people. We also came at it from a perspective of the shifting demographics of farmers in the country, as is widely evident. People are getting older. There's no one to come in and take over farms. It's getting all bought up and consolidated into corporate farms that have external investors. And it's not basically made for people to make a living. It's there for people to invest and get a bunch of money out of it. So we thought right from the start, if we established it in that cooperative model, we would be able to build off of that and really hammer home our ethics of land access, food access, and just diversity of people on the land. So it was kind of a natural transition of from a family farm. We decided this is what the family is going to be, is people that are here that care for the land, and that's as good a family as you can have. So that's how I see co-ops.
Yeah, and combined with the sort of rich history of co-ops up there in Wisconsin too. I know down here in Kentucky, if you had taken that approach, a lot of people would have looked at you sideways, or how does that make sense, or where did you get that idea from? But there's not, aside from the old tobacco growers cooperatives, there's just not a lot of cooperative history in recent memory down here in Kentucky. So
we still get side eyes sometimes. Like the old timers, they're all like, "What? You got people named not Adamski growing on that farmland? What are you doing?"
So how does that work in practice? Correct me if I'm wrong. There are 5 sort of farmer owners. How does that play out on your farm? I guess backing up a little bit, how do you decide what a farmer owner is?
Yeah, so going from the basics, when we incorporated, it was back in 2019. So it was really just the 3 of us, me, Heather, and Scott, that decided to form an entity together. At the time, we were all, was it green-eyed, bushy hair, bushy tail, something like that. We didn't really know nearly anything about business structures and tax implications or anything like that. But we decided to, so in that vein, we decided to incorporate as an LLC partnership. We did look at the time into different cooperative ownership structures like B Corps and all that stuff. And it's still up on the table for sure. We want to reincorporate and make it fully established as a cooperative entity. However, the LLC seemed at the time to be the most straightforward and easy entry point to do it. We operate basically under cooperative models where one person, one vote kind of thing. We have structures of how to go about decision making where it's not all one person. However, we do try and spread out, like I said, that decision making. So my parents are still involved. They handle most of the cattle decisions. Scott, Heather, and I make a lot of decisions together about the vegetables. And then there's also the pigs, which me and my parents kind of do together. And then there's a 4th or 6th, I guess, person now, Lori, who had came on 2-3 years ago as an employee for my parents. And now we're starting to work her in towards on that ownership model. There's other people in the vegetable side of things that were also coming into that, I guess, ownership decision-making level. And we're starting to have conversations about how to bring them in and have them feel like that they're not just employees. And that's always been the foundation of hire people and how we do our quote unquote HR, is that it's not you're an employee and you have to do everything we say. It's you're a part of the farm. Your decision and thoughts matter. And we want you to come to us and talk, and we'll all make decisions together. So that's kind of how we did that. Did I answer your question? I think I did.
No, you did. So, starting from that LLC sort of partnership, and then within any sort of bylaws or incorporating documents, it's really easy to set up and get a notary to notarize, what decision-making framework you want to use. It's a really straightforward and easy place to start. As I've looked into it myself, that seems to be the Yeah, the easiest way to kind of get the ball rolling. And then if you need to change your structure later on, you can do that, but start with a simple one that's really easy to change or manage, or, and then you can kind of develop your chops, or develop what you want out of the cooperative from there, make changes pretty easily. And I really like that you brought up that everybody has all of the owners have decision-making capacity on the farm. It also sounds like you all are trusting each other with your enterprises. You know what I mean? Instead of everybody always having a say over everything, it seems like there's some trust, just implying from how you explained it that, the decisions about the cattle are going to be made and they're going to be managed well, so that frees you up to focus on specific enterprises. Yeah. And before we get too far into that, what does it take to become a member? Is it just like the amount of time that you spend on the farm, and then you're able to be more involved in the decision-making capacity? Is there any other sort of membership criteria?
Yeah, I guess we've sort of organically just let people in on the decision making, because, hands on the ground are the people that see and know what best to do. So there's not been a formalized version yet of saying you are now this rank in the LLC and therefore you get to make decisions. It's you're here, you're doing stuff, you know what to do. You can make decisions. So that's kind of the thing that has been on my mind as a challenge of what do we do and how do we start to formalize and codify the ownership structure, where it's like a double-edged sword of, you want people to feel that sense of ownership and that sense of purpose in the farm, but you also don't want to scare them away by being like, now you're an owner and you got to pay taxes or something like that, So we're still dancing around that problem a little bit and kicking it down the road as we have established, and really trying to get our footing under us as we get our foundational enterprises really humming. Because, it's a farm, and you got to have the farm enterprise itself work before you can really get in there and get into the nuances of making what's in your head reality in the legal space.
Yeah, but it is good. You can start on that. You don't have to have it all figured out before you start down that path and that journey. It's something that can develop over time.
And to me, it was almost like I didn't want to put that pressure on anyone else at the start, especially when, as you know, there's that, the 3 or 4 year hurdle of, if your farm doesn't make it, it's going to be in those first 4 years. So I didn't want to really, it felt irresponsible from me to be offering that to other people and say like, hey, buy in and you can be an owner. But also there's a chance that we go bankrupt and we have to sell everything and you might not end up seeing anything. So it was kind of balancing that decision making along with risk for other people. And we just decided to do it organically and say, you're here, you make decisions. You don't need to be owner yet because it's risky.
No, I like that balance. The first 3 to 5 years, I think, is that's where all of the risk seems to be. A lot of investing and a lot of growing and a lot of figuring out your markets. And then once you have it established, you can start to really reliably bring more people in and not have them lose their skin, by investing too early. So from there, I think we could pivot a little bit. You all work with an organization. Well, you just listed off a ton of organizations earlier on that you all work with, like farm school programs and whatnot. But then you also work with the Slow Food Co-op.
Slow Farmers Co-op.
Slow Farmers Co-op, not Slow Food. That's my bad. That's a typo on my end.
The slow food movement that the name Slow Farmers Co-op is based on.
Yeah. So the Slow Farmers Co-op is sort of from what I can tell, like a farmers marketing cooperative. Could you explain to us what the Slow Farmers Co-op is, and how that got started as well?
Yeah, so the Slow Farmers Co-op is a cooperative of farmers here in Northeast Wisconsin that We're all small and primarily have been doing direct consumer sales. The idea at the outset of it had been formed by my parents and a few other local farmers probably 3 or 4 years before we had moved back to the farm. So it had already existed. It kind of was trying to coincide with, this is all the history of the Green Bay local food system, which for those of you interested, it's like, if you know Madison's food system, where like Madison is this shining gem in the Midwest of local foods, farmers everywhere. There's like 50 farmers markets every day. Green Bay is like 20 or 30 years behind. So back in 2016, 17, I want to say, there was a organization, New Leaf Foods, Northeast Wisconsin Foods, that was trying to establish a food cooperative, like the grocery store cooperative in town. And they were trying to come up with a way of equitably buying produce, meat, eggs from local farms. And the farmers came together and said, maybe instead of all of us competing to have the lowest price to, be able to sell as much as we can, but race to the bottom to get into that co-op, let's form a co-op of our own, set the prices ourselves, and then the co-op sells to the co-op, right? So that was the genesis of the idea of the Slow Farmers Co-op. There's a lot of hiccups that happened with the grocery store co-op that culminated in it not ever getting built or established. So there was some foundering at that point where the co-op had to pivot and come up with an idea of, now what are we doing? And it kind of landed on, well, let's go towards mid-scale institutions, hospitals, schools, not necessarily restaurants, because restaurants, hit or miss. One farm can deal with it themselves, whatever. More so the like cafeteria style, where you can have a consistent supply, but you also need pretty good inventory and consistency of product. So that's where it pivoted towards. And then this is a long history. I don't know if I'm going to get boring with all of it, but this kind of the thing about co-ops is like, when you have a lot of people in the room making decisions, you get a lot of ideas of where else you can go, but also you can get a lot of ideas of maybe that's not the best thing. And we had farmers that dropped out because they were like, no, we want to focus on the schools, or we want to focus on this. And so it kind of split up a few times. The iteration that it's in now, and has been for the last 3, maybe 4 years, is primarily a cooperative CSA. So the Slow Farmers Co-op essentially came in, and this all happened during COVID, when brick and mortar grocery was having a lot of trouble. The co-op came in and kind of stabilized that for the consumers in Green Bay, Fox Valley, which is like Appleton. It's like sister cities of Green Bay, all one big metro almost. And so the Slow Farmers Co-op now is basically an administrator of this cooperative CSA model. So we've taken it and made it the retail co-op that it originally was supposed to be.
Now, I don't know about you, but I got into farming to grow food, not spend time creating pack lists, writing newsletters, responding to emails, maintaining web stores. Look, if I could spend less time on my phone and my computer and more time actually farming, that would be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for CSA farmers. It takes care of all the admin, managing orders, customer communications, automating tedious tasks so that you can get back to doing what you love, right? On average, Farmhand saves CSA farmers about 6 hours a week. That 6 hours you could, spend time with your family, get back out into the field, or just take a breather. So what would you do with those extra 6 hours? Now is the time to get your systems ready for next season. Learn how Farmhand can help at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. Link is in the show notes. This episode is also brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. It is seed browsing season, and High Mowing Organic Seeds is releasing 66, not 65, not 67, 66 new seed varieties for 2025 on November 1st. These beautiful and productive vegetable, flower, and herb varieties are 100% organic and non-GMO and trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. Now, I don't know about you. I follow NOP guidelines and order organic seeds, partially because I have to, But it's very easy to look through their catalog and know that everything is clear and safe for me to order. Just a side note, whether you're trying to bring the best to your CSA, wholesale customers of the farmer's market, High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingorganicseeds.com to request a catalog. Use code NOTIL25, that's NOTILL25 for 10% off of your order of $100 or more. Again, visit highmowingseeds.com. All right, let's get back to the show. And you all are doing sort of combining all of your products into a CSA and then delivering that directly to consumers through an online platform, right?
Yeah, we'll do a little plug. Local Food Marketplace, that's the software that we use. It has been really helpful for that multi-farm cooperative model. We kind of based it off of actually the Bayfield Food Co-op in Bayfield. I think it's the Bayfield Farmers Co-op, something like that. They have a very, very, very similar model where a bunch of farmers formed a farmer co-op, sell to their food co-op, and then they also started a cooperative veggie and meat CSA. So we took that and we're like, that's a great idea. Let's try it here. And it works really, really well. The huge benefit that has brought it to Full Circle Farm is that we can focus on growing things that we like to grow and that grow well. So I don't want to grow potatoes right now. There's other farmers in the co-op that do. That's great. You grow the potatoes, I'll grow scallions. I don't know. And it allows all the farmers to kind of pool those crops together and supply that consistency of product, the consistency of availability to the customers, to the people that are buying into the CSA, as well as then kind of creating a buffer that allows us to have opportunities to get into more of those mid institutions, the schools, the cafeterias, and things like that.
So you have like a latent capacity because you have so many people working together with so much product that you can move on an opportunity that opens up a lot faster than if you're on a farm yourself doing all of these things, all the full diet, all the things. It's harder to shift into an opening in the marketplace, especially at that mid scale.
Right. Yep.
Man, I have like 8 questions now. How do you all come together to decide what goes into that CSA offering? Now, in my mind, I envision it more or less like a standard box every week. Maybe you can correct me on that.
It's a fully customizable box. So we preload based on availability what is most abundant. Pre-make a box. There's probably under half don't ever customize. Throughout the entire season, I'd say probably everyone customizes. It might be like, oh, I don't want Brussels sprouts this week. I'm going to do sweet potatoes instead. But still, most everyone is customizing at that point. But that availability is preloaded every week. We have an online inventory that as people are switching and adding stuff, it'll automatically draw down. And then, so that customization window, I think, is Tuesday through Friday for the members, CSA members. And then the farmers get the orders, quote unquote, Friday afternoon, Saturday. And then we pack it all Monday morning. And then it goes out for delivery Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
So it sounds like you all are uploading your inventory into the system. Is there any sort of administration, or how is Slow Farmers going about handling the aggregation and the delivery of that product?
So there's kind of 2 aspects of that. There's the back end administration, which my partner Heather is the general manager of the co-op. So she's sort of shifted away from the Full Circle Farm side and more primarily works as that co-op administrator. However, Full Circle Farm is one of the pretty much the biggest contributor to Slow Farmers. So we're one of the, I guess you'd call it like keystone species in the co-op, which is important, like that. The idea of the co-op isn't to have like everyone huge and everyone selling all over the place. It's to create opportunities for beginning farmers that, if you don't want to take on an entire CSA by yourself right out the bat, join the co-op, get your stuff in. So Heather does the back end administration where she'll basically build the boxes based on what the farmers send in to her as the inventory of what they have available. And then she sends out the packing reports and distribution orders that come in from CSA to other wholesale people. And then as far as the aggregation goes, we do it all on the farm here. We have, as the most established and biggest farm, have the most infrastructure, walk-in coolers, pack line, all that stuff. So then we aggregate the produce. And there's other things like pasta and bread and eggs and stuff that also come here. We aggregate that on our pack line, put the boxes together, and then do a weekly delivery distribution out of the farm here.
Yeah, that's it. You mentioned that keystone species. I feel like for any sort of cooperative like this, or I mean, even in a farmer's market, to have 1, 2, 3 sort of keystone farmers as, you know, something that you could build a farmer's market or build a cooperative off of, still have a diverse offering, and then other people can plug in as they need, especially like you said, those beginning farmers who don't want to grow everything or want to specialize. They have leveraging the scale and diversity of a keystone farm to be able to help many other small farmers or small producers instead of just taking all of the customers themselves. You know,
exactly.
I think that's like cooperatives all the way down sort of mentality.
Yeah.
You know,
and honestly, I always say this, but like so much of the farming and even like, especially the business world, so much of the farming and business world is mirrored, and we can learn so much from ecological models. So when I say keystone species, I mean it in an ecological context of, you know, you have this species that everyone sees and is like beavers, you know, beavers are the ones cutting the trees down, building dams, but then all the other species that are dependent on the beavers making those dams also help make the trees that the beavers cut down to make the dams. So as a keystone species, you're not able to survive by yourself. You just have the most movement and impact on the rest of the environment, but that environment still supports you. So if you don't do your part, you're going to die too.
Yeah. I have thought for a while that, you know, the more that I learn about soil biology is how can we use lessons in ecology and biology, and especially microbiology, to start redesigning systems that depend on that look like that. So how can we scale up to our farm? What does our individual farm need to look like, and mirroring sort of that interdependence and that relational aspect of soil biology? But then also, how do our farms function with other farms in that way, and within the community that way, and within the people who eat from the farm in that way? So it seems like you're already there. It seems like you're developing this web of relationships and interdependence, and using your farm as, that leverage point, that jumping off point to start a lot of this.
Yeah, that's, like you just said, it's entirely ecologically based, you know? So when we talk about being regenerative, or we talk about modeling ecological principles, it's not just how we're doing it biologically in the farm. It's about how we're doing it socially and economically as humans. We're still biological beings. We have to model, or it'd be better if we modeled more of our interactions and structures based on what's out there already and what works.
Yeah, what has been working for eons, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Going back through all of this work, I mean, it seems like you've done a huge amount of work over the last 7 years since you've come back to the farm.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Knowing what you know now, or where you're at now, is there any particular advice you would give the you that moved back to the farm in 2017 about getting into this work? Or what would you, somebody like myself who's thinking about sort of how to take a small farm or a market garden sort of to that next cooperative level?
Oh, geez. I guess I would say trust your gut. If what you're seeing and the cues that you're being given by the environment around you are saying there's a need here or there's an opportunity here, try it. Because worst that's going to happen is it won't work. At the end of the day, you're going to be okay. whether it works or not. It'd be better if it works, but you're not going to know until you try.
And it seems like you all have designed a lot of it around building it as you go, which is also an option. You don't have to get it right out of the gate, or it doesn't have to be 100% complete right out of the gate.
I think if you think you have it right out of the gate, you're probably not doing it right. There's probably something that's wrong.
Is there anything else in your experience, or even outside of farming, that you feel like has been on your mind a lot, that you're thinking about, that's maybe sort of like pushing the boundaries of your work, or, kind of getting into where's sort of your leading edge right now, as you're thinking about farming or cooperative development, or, just sort of life on this earth in general?
There's a lot going on. The state of the world seems to be more disheveled than it ever has been. That might be a perception of modern recency bias, but we have technological innovations that are like AI is making music by itself without human input. There's major disruptions to the way things have been that are happening now. And it seems like, always have been, you're always at a crossroads of when you go this way or that way. So right now we can decide, are we going to choose to help other things and other people and life continue and live? Or are we going to, kind of give up and say, there's no point. The 25% of insects have already died. We're past that tipping point. There's no point in trying anymore. So let's just keep going the way we have. What that looks like on a daily basis for me is, I kind of alluded to foundational enterprises here on the farm: veggies, pigs, cattle. When we first started our business modeling, we said we're going to have multiple phases. We've fully gone through and established our first phase. The second phase we're getting into is value added. So I'm starting to write a lot of grants for infrastructure, for on-farm processing. Agritourism, I think, is going to be extremely important going forward for all farms, but especially small, cooperative, ecologically based farms, because of the continuing trend of people urbanizing, getting away from the land that feeds them, and needing to create space for community to come together in a place that isn't man-made, human-made, right? Creating space and holding space to just be people in the wild world. And wild is, this, we've talked about it as, is there really any wild? Is that a human construct itself? So maybe not. Maybe there isn't. If there are, they're probably as good as they're going to be right now. But that kind of liminal space, that wild but also farm, showing people that there is a way to establish and allow all the life to thrive while still growing food, not just food, but like really good food for all the people in the community, I think is really huge. And that's going to impact not only the food system in the country, but also the mental health of everyone. There's all these studies being like, go outside and get daylight and go, forest bathe or something. Why not do that on a farm? Why not go out to, your farm 15 minutes down the road and forest bathe, pet some pigs, and pick an apple or something? And then go up to the barn that used to be a horse barn or dairy barn and have a glass of wine and a wood-fired pizza. And yeah, things like that. Just not seeing farms as just a place to grow food, but as a place to grow society and community. I think, is the leading edge for all of us. Because we can grow food. We know how to do it now. We know that soil biology is important. We know that cover cropping and crop rotation and heirloom vegetables and diversified farming operations work. We know that. Now it's, let's do some more stuff and see what else can happen.
Yeah, no, I feel like you and I are like right on the same page there. It's like we're figuring out so much. Like I think it's a little hard for us to figure out. We've reached the point of diminishing returns on how well we can grow a vegetable, but we've not even begun to really tap into how can we plug a community into a farm,
right,
for its own sake, for its own mental health, for its own food sovereignty, for its own many things that everybody's saying that we need right now. So absolutely, I love that. Yeah. Well, Andrew, I'm going to go ahead and not take up any more of your time. I know that you've been really busy lately, not only working on all the stuff on your farm, but we had to reschedule because you had another meeting to do. So, I really appreciate you taking this time to tell us about this place. And I'm going to, I'll put links to everything that you mentioned in the show notes, as well as to your website, as well as to Slow Farmers Co-op, so that people can kind of take a look at what you all are doing there. And, I really hope that people really take home that it's exactly what you said, just start. And the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to be back where you were before you started.
And at the end of that, you'll still have learned something.
Absolutely. Well, Andrew, thank you so much. Good rest of the winter to you. I hope you all survive those winter storms up there. And we'll hopefully we'll catch up again in a year and see how things are going.
Yeah, thanks, Jackson. Hey, I'm also a rock climber, and I come down to the Red River Gorge.
Oh, yeah.
I was down there last March. I'm probably going to be back down there again. Maybe I'll stop by if I can.
We are not too far. So, yeah, we're probably 2 hours from there. And I don't know how big of a trip that you make.
16-hour drive. It's just the standard Midwest thing,
Yeah, right. 16 hours to anywhere. Yeah, come by. Let me know when you're coming. I'll give you directions and make a space for you.
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right. Thanks to Andrew for sharing his farm with all of us. Dr. Professor Michael Sellis for making this sound as good as it possibly can. Michelle for keeping the lights on. Farmer Jesse and our sponsors, Grow Organic, ASAP, and High Mowing Organic Seeds, as well as our Patreon supporters for allowing us to produce all that we do for free. You can support the show at patreon.com/no-till growers, because many hands make light work.